While LSU rested, chaos ensued in the SEC. What does it mean for the Tigers? Let's talk about it. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. What a day in college football. We got a lot to talk about. Jahkeem Stewart, the number one prospect in the country for 2026, has officially reclassified. I'll give you some tidbits on that. So where does LSU fall amid all of this SEC chaos? But let us begin with the day that was. And it got started with the first and only ranked-on-ranked matchup in college football on Saturday. Number 9 Missouri in College Station against Texas A&M, and we saw how that one went 41-10. Texas A&M dominated that football game from start to finish. You may ask, is A&M a contender? Was Missouri a fraud? I tend to lean more toward Missouri being a fraud. This is a team that Vanderbilt missed a chip shot field goal. More on Vandy in a second. Vanderbilt missed a chip shot field goal or would have beaten Missouri in Como. I think they finally got exposed, but Texas A&M very much on notice. Alabama went to Vanderbilt, and for the first time in 40 years, Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt notched a top 5 win for the first time in its program's history. They were 0-60 prior to that. A stunning development. And if that weren't enough, Tennessee went to Fayetteville and lost to Arkansas 19-14. That high-powered Tennessee offense was grounded, and the Hogs pulled out a late win 19-14. What do all of those games have in common? Oh, by the way, if you are watching right now to hear my take on Bama losing to Vanderbilt, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. But what do those three things have in common? Missouri at A&M. Alabama at Vanderbilt. Tennessee at Arkansas. Y'all, it is hard to win on the road in the SEC. When Georgia went to Kentucky and got in a bare-knuckle fight and ended up squeezing past the Wildcats, Kirby Smart, in his post-game press conference, said just as much. I'll take a win on the road in the SEC any day. Does that maybe give us a little more perspective on LSU managing to go to Columbia, South Carolina in the third week of the season, being down 17 on the road and finding a way to fight back? Look, I know that game wasn't pretty. I know this season hasn't been great for LSU at times, but given what we saw on Saturday in the SEC in particular, and what we've seen for teams on the road, Georgia going to Alabama, which, by the way, we're going to talk about Alabama, but Georgia, 4 turnovers and a safety cost it an opportunity to win that game on the road. It is hard to win on the road in the SEC. You can make any excuses you want. The bottom line is going into a raucous environment against talented physical teams is not an easy thing to do. LSU's done it once this year. And oh, by the way, LSU is one of only 4 schools right now that are currently undefeated in the SEC. Texas A&M, Texas, LSU, excuse me. One of only 3 schools with Tennessee's loss. Texas A&M, Texas, LSU, the only schools that are undefeated in the SEC right now. By the way, A&M's 3-0 in the conference and the top of the standing. So maybe we'll have to talk about Texas A&M. But right now, I don't think there's any doubt anybody wants to hear me talk about anything other than Vanderbilt beating Alabama. Now, if you have followed my content for any length of time, you know that for the last 9 months, I have celebrated every single solitary bit of misfortune that has come Alabama's way. I've done this bit on my radio show called Bama is Burning. We play O Fortuna. We put flames on the screen, and I laugh like a maniacal madman at every bit of misfortune. A coach leaves, they lose a recruit, a player, anything. And my point, and while I agree, and I fully understand, I don't expect anyone to look at me as a completely objective commentator when it comes to Alabama because of the way I've behaved over the last 9 months. And I understand that, and I'm okay with that. But if I were to give you a very measured take on Alabama, the same thing I've said for 9 months, but to say it in a more measured way, my point has been this. You can't lose the greatest coach ever and not feel it. You can't have half of your roster turn over year to year and not miss a beat. Kalen DeBoer is a very good coach. I've never said he's a bad coach. Kalen DeBoer is a good football coach. He's won it everywhere he's been. But he's not Nick Saban. And one thing that's been evident of Kalen DeBoer everywhere has been, including last year at Washington, when they blew a 17-point lead in the Pac-12 championship game, only to come back and win. Same thing in the regular season game against Oregon. They blew a double-digit fourth quarter lead. They needed a last-second field goal, walk-off, to win the Apple Cup against Washington State, a sub-500 Washington State team. This Alabama team was in a one-score game midway through the fourth quarter with South Florida on their home field. This Alabama team blew a 4-touchdown lead at home against Georgia. But my point always is, winning masks deficiencies, losing magnifies them. The way that we feel about LSU after that SC loss, we're not highlighting any of the good things. We're magnifying the bad things because they lost. What about Alabama? Nobody's talking about the fact that they ran for 16 yards in the second half against Georgia, that Georgia effectively dominated them throughout that entire second half of the football game because they got an amazing play from a freshman that saved them from the embarrassment of blowing a 4-touchdown lead. But when you live dangerously, eventually play with fire, you're going to get burned. The example that I gave that a lot of Alabama fans didn't like this week is that Alabama's living in their Les Miles era. Y'all, Les Miles, I'm going to be very clear. Les Miles was a great football coach. He won a national championship, played for another that Alabama should have never gotten the rematch in. He won 2 SEC titles, played for a third, averaged 9 wins a year for more than a decade in the SEC, and in the SEC West, a division in which he had to look at Nick Saban, the greatest coach ever, every single year in his own division. Les Miles is a good coach, and so is Kalen DeBoer. But how many times did you leave the stadium on football Saturdays wondering how in the world did LSU win that? How frustrated were you times after wins? The Tennessee game in 2010. I could go down the list. I mean, from literally the first game Les ever coached when somehow they escaped a win against Arizona State out in Tempe, his first home game where they had a 21-point lead, a 21-0 lead on Tennessee, only to blow it and lose in overtime, a game that many LSU fans never forgot. That is what Alabama is living through right now. It's not that Alabama is bad. It's not that they're going to be a bad football team. It's not that they're going to win 6 games. It's not that they're going to the depths of despair. It's just that they are no longer going to be the dominant force that won 6 national titles in 12 years. They're just going to look more like everybody else. And they can be really good. Like Tennessee is really good and Georgia's really good. And LSU, I think, can be really good. There's some really good teams. Ole Miss can be really good, despite their loss to Kentucky last week. But Bama is entering territory they haven't seen in 20 years right now. It's unfamiliar for them, and they better get used to it because there's more of it. They still have to go to Rocky Top. They have to go to Baton Rouge. It ain't going to get easier for Alabama. And quite honestly, they're lucky that they're only sitting there at 1 loss right now. So, yes, on my radio show on Monday, I am going to do celebratory, insane, outlandish, theatrical things, and it is going to be a lot of fun laughing at Alabama for losing to Vanderbilt. Y'all, let's be honest as well. This wasn't a fluke. Vanderbilt put up 400 yards and 40 points on Alabama. They gashed Alabama with the running game all day. My buddy Chris Marler, who works with us over at LouisianaSports.net, dug this stat up that everybody's copying right now, but Chris is the one who found it. In his entire career at Alabama, Nick Saban's defense has allowed 13 points to Vanderbilt. In the first half Saturday, Kalen DeBoer's defense allowed 23 and 40 for the game. It is a new day in Tuscaloosa, and it's a day with which Alabama fans are not familiar. Look, Alabama may beat LSU and Baton Rouge this year. I don't know how the game's going to go, but it's not about LSU being propped up. It's about Alabama, the 10,000-pound crimson gorilla in the room that everybody had to battle to get where you wanted to go, is no longer as daunting as they were. Yes, they're going to win, and yes, they're going to be good. But they're not invincible. That's very clear, because a Nick Saban team would never have blown a 4-touchdown home lead to Georgia. A Nick Saban team would have never given up 40 and lost to Vanderbilt, ever. But that's the new reality for Vanderbilt and a new reality in the SEC. So where does LSU rank in this SEC? I want to talk about that a smidge as we continue. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. Love telling you about LinkedIn. Great partners here on Locked on LSU. I hit the wrong overlay. I apologize. If you're hiring for your business, for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, that's why you have to find LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect fit in the perfect role if it's there. In a given month, more than 70% of LinkedIn users don't even bother visiting other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's show is also brought to you by Game Time. Hey, look, LSU is going to take on Ole Miss coming up this Saturday in Tiger Stadium. If you want to be in that number, you're not sure where you can get tickets, make sure you punch up the Game Time app, whether it's sporting events, music, theater, comedy. If you love to attend live events in person, you have to discover Game Time. The feature that I love the most is the toggle feature. It's the all-in pricing. If you're not familiar, you've probably had this happen before where you look up a ticket, you see the price on the app. By the time you get to checkout, it's a much higher price. Not at Game Time. Toggle the feature. Now remember, for all-in pricing, you got to turn on that feature. But toggle that feature. It'll show you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, so you know exactly what you're going to pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. So we went through the standings in the SEC, and LSU is one of only 3 remaining unbeaten teams in the Southeastern Conference. But where does the LSU fall right now in the SEC hierarchy? Well, it's tough to say. I think A&M was certainly impressive in the manner in which they beat Missouri, but I also don't think Missouri is very good. I think Texas and Oklahoma will have a lot to say about their future in the conference with this game coming up this weekend with the Red River rivalry. And the same goes for LSU. It's why I love the month of October, y'all. I love the month of October because in October, it's all conference games, and it's kind of like moving day in a golf major. It's like Saturday. This is where you determine what you're playing for in November. And for LSU, it all comes down to Saturday against Ole Miss. Look, if you beat Ole Miss and you're 5-1 at the halfway point of your season, is it plausible to think that you can be 5-1 in the second half of your season and go 10-2 and make a playoff? Yes. Is it also plausible that after you play Ole Miss, which is going to be a very difficult game, you got to go to Arkansas? How did that work out for Tennessee? And then after Arkansas, you got to go to College Station. How did that work for Missouri? And then after that, you get an open date, then you get to play Alabama, an Alabama team that, yes, lost to Vanderbilt, but also beat Georgia. And then after that, you get to go to Gainesville, a Florida team that certainly has struggled, but they put it on Central Florida on Saturday. I don't think they've righted the ship. I don't think Florida's very good. But playing in Gainesville is never easy. And then you get to come home and play Vanderbilt. Oh, by the way, the Vanderbilt team that's already beaten Virginia Tech, that just upset Alabama, should have beaten Missouri on the road if their kicker would have made a chip shot field goal and choked away a fourth quarter lead against Georgia Southern. Vanderbilt should very well be undefeated right now. And then you get to come home and play Oklahoma, an Oklahoma team that has had its struggles, but an Oklahoma team that went on the road and gave Tennessee all it wanted, and an Oklahoma team that went on the road and found a way to beat Auburn. That's what you have remaining. The SEC is a relentless machine. There are no weeks off in the SEC. That's something Texas and Oklahoma are certainly going to learn as they move throughout this season. There are no layups. There is no Kansas, respect to Kansas, lately anyway. There is no one-win Colorado team. It is hard to win in the SEC week in and week out. So how much better has LSU gotten? But to find out. Now, if there's one more good thing as LSU enters game week against Ole Miss, and you never want to pull for injuries, but Ole Miss played a massively physical game against Kentucky. Their injury report going into South Carolina had 30 players on it. 30. Ole Miss went to South Carolina, and during the course of that game, Walter Nolan, their interior defensive lineman, J.J. Pegues, their interior defensive lineman, Trey Harris, their all-everything wide receiver, all left that South Carolina game with injuries. Now, we'll check on them. Pegues returned, actually ran for a couple of touchdowns in the game, oddly enough, but we'll check on him how it goes this week. But this will be back-to-back-to-back conference games for Ole Miss, including back-to-back road conference games where they are physically beat up, and LSU should be rested and ready. Massive opportunity for LSU Saturday in Tiger Stadium. And it'll be interesting to see if the former number one player for the class of 2026, Jahkeem Stewart, is there. We got the news on Saturday officially. Jahkeem Stewart tweeted it that the number one player for the class of 2026, the defensive lineman who was at St. Aug, who transferred to Edna Carr, he has officially now reclassified for the class of 2025. So Jahkeem Stewart, no longer a member of the 2026 class, now 2025, on 3 for 2025, still rates him as a 5-star, the number 19 overall player in the country. LSU still thought to be the leader for Jahkeem Stewart. As long as Frank Wilson's on staff at LSU and Bo Davis, and LSU gets the NIL money right, it stands to reason that they should feel good about their opportunity to land Jahkeem Stewart. But there are some big-time programs still interested. Texas, Oregon, Southern Cal, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia. Can LSU fend them all off? Now, Tigers already have 4 defensive tackles committed for the class of 2025. But you will absolutely take Jahkeem Stewart, a transcendent type player. And if you're looking at LSU defensively and looking at how they improve, well, they improve by adding better talent. And DJ Pickett, the number one cornerback in the country, he'll be there next year. Dom McKinley, Ahmad Bro, Gabe Relaford, PJ Woodland, Deshaun Spears, freshmen that are already making an impact. And now you start to look toward next year. And if you're able to add Jahkeem Stewart as well to that mix, that includes the number one cornerback in the country, all of a sudden now the LSU roster starts to look like some of those championship rosters in the past. They're not there yet, and you still got to get to signing day. But you can very clearly see that the arrow for the future is pointing up. The big question for the now is, can LSU go take care of business against Ole Miss in a home game and facing that gauntlet ahead? It is not easy in the SEC. And if you had forgotten that, we all got a very clear reminder of that on Saturday. The good news for the Tigers, they got to kick up their feet, rest, relax, heal, and take it all in as observers and get ready to take on Ole Miss Saturday in Tiger Stadium. You better believe it's going to be an awesome environment for Saturday night in Death Valley. And we'll be here all week leading you up to it. Hey, thanks so much for being here with us. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you are on YouTube, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.